Alright, coming to you time delayed from Casa de Brewer. I'm here to teach you guys. You thought you had an easy day, but it turns out, actually it shouldn't be too hard, but in order for you guys to get started with your project, you're really going to have to know what happens in Beowulf in order to be able to write about it. So the agenda for today is we'll read this section. Make sure you have this, section 2, and actually if you look on back, section 3 also in there, and then section 4 and 5. These are the battle scenes in Beowulf, so these are actually pretty cool scenes. This is where a lot of your content can come from, whether you're doing a visual project, if you're writing a song, making a video game, or whatever it is that you're doing, consider using these scenes. So make sure you have both of these packets. Make sure you have both of these sets of questions. One should say section 2 and 3, and at the bottom it says EZ. That means it's easy. And the other one, section 4 and 5, and that one is easy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this aloud to you guys, and then we'll stop and talk about the questions. We'll make sure that you know the answers to the questions so that when you get started on your project, you can. Now the other thing that you should have, and I don't have a copy of this right now because it doesn't exist yet, but is a piece of paper that says something to the effect of Beowulf Project Individual Contract at the top. So take a look at that. At the end of the period, the thing that you're going to turn into me besides these two pieces of paper, which you'll have the answers to if you pay attention to me, is that individual contract. In an individual contract, you're going to need to tell me what project you're going to do, what the final product is going to be. You need to tell me who you're going to be working with, if you're working in a group, what you're going to be graded for, so that I know when I look at whatever it is that you turn in, that this part is from you individually, and then you're going to be creating a little rubric for me to be able to tell whether or not you have met the standards. But you're setting the standards for this project, which means you got to figure out how you're going to prove to me what you know. And the fun part is important, and the part where you can bring your sort of professional knowledge to it is also important to me. But don't forget that part of this comes from knowing something about Beowulf. So, yes, I do want your visual representation to be artistic and stylish, and I want you to do better at a drawing than I could ever do. Yes, I do want your original song to be artistic and catchy. I want you to do better at making a song than I could ever do, but I want you to do just as well as I would do at explaining Beowulf, no matter what it is that you decide to do for your project. So we'll get that contract signed, or contract made, I'll look over it, and then next week I'll have you sign it. So that means that's what you're going to do. And next week, Tuesday, Thursday, and probably Monday of the next week is dedicated to getting these projects done. First we have to figure out what's going on in Beowulf. So, there's no real easy way for me to do this except for to start reading. I figured I was going to play the CD, but the CD doesn't work. It only has one section. So I'll read along here. I'll stop when it's time to answer some questions, and we'll answer the questions together. Okay? So, first thing I want you to do is look at section 2 and 3. This chart at the top, if you read this, at the top it says, a kenning is a phrase that replaces a character's name, often to emphasize something about the character or to make him sound more heroic. As you read, locate one kenning for each of the following characters, quote the kenning, include the line number, then tell what kind of kenning it is. There's 3 different types here. Finally, tell the purpose or the effect of the kenning. What is being emphasized about the character? Why might this part of the character's aspect be important? Why are they using this kenning? How does it make him seem more heroic? So, while you're listening, number 2 through number 9 are sort of there in order. What happens when? Number 1, you have to sort of listen out for kenning. I gave you an example, a kenning for Mr. Brewer, teacher of English. That's a prepositional kenning. You know it's a prepositional kenning because it has the word of in it. If it was a possessive kenning, it would have an apostrophe S. If it was a compound kenning, it would usually have a dash in it. I don't know if we'll find any compound kennings in this, but you got to be listening for it. That's one of those terms from our notes that's going to be important on the test. And yes, you're going to do this project, and you're also going to have to take the test. So kennings are these sort of heroic sayings that make somebody sound fancy. So rather than just saying, Mr. Brewer made a video in his PJs for a third block class, you would say, Mr. Brewer, that teacher of English, made a video, and so it makes me sound more heroic, makes me sound sort of royal. It says here that the effect of that is that it emphasizes my professional role and my area of expertise. My professional role, teacher, area of expertise, English. There's nothing special about that, but that is what it does. It sort of emphasizes who I am or what I do, and that's what happens in these poems as well. For each of the characters, right? So we're looking for one for Hrothgar, one for Beowulf, one for Grendel. Okay, from sections 2 and 3, the battle with Grendel. Good? Alright, have this out. Follow along, please, as I read. And have this next to it so that you can fill these out as you come to them. I'm starting at the top. Line 104. So this is section 2. This is about Beowulf coming to help Hrothgar. Remember, Hrothgar's people are being besieged by the monster Grendel. Beowulf hears about it. Section 2 is kind of boring, guys. There's a couple of speeches, one by Beowulf, one by Hrothgar. But Beowulf sort of talks big talk. He talks about his heroic feats of the past, and then Hrothgar pretty much begs him to help out. He says, I knew your father, please help me. And you can sort of listen. So the living sorrow of Healfdene's son, that's Hrothgar, by the way. His sorrow is that he's being besieged. Simmered, bitter and fresh, and no wisdom or strength could break it. That agony hung on king and people alike, harsh and unending, violent and cruel and evil. In his far-off home, Beowulf, Higlac's follower, well, let's just pause for a second. Higlac's follower, that's actually a possessive kenning. So if you skip down to Beowulf there and you wanted to write in Higlac's follower, that comes from line 109 to 110. And what that's emphasizing, Higlac is his uncle, is the king. So what that's emphasizing is the importance of kinship or the fact that he's loyal or something like that. That's possessive. You see the apostrophe there? So that's a possessive kenning. And the strongest of the Geats, greater and stronger than anyone anywhere in this world, heard how Grendel filled knights with horror and quickly commanded a boat fitted out, proclaiming that he'd go to that famous king, would sail across the sea to Hrothgar, now when his help was needed. None of the wise ones regretted his going, much as he was loved by the Geats. The omens were good, and they urged the adventure on, so Beowulf chose the mightiest men he could find, the bravest and best of the Geats, 14 in all, and led them down to their boat. He knew the sea, would point the prow straight at that distant Danish shore. So Beowulf and his men are about to sail over the sea to the land of the Danes, to Denmark. Remember, they're from Sweden, the Geats, to help Hrothgar. They are escorted by a Danish guard to Heorot, where Wulfgar, one of Hrothgar's soldiers, tells the king of their arrival. Hrothgar knows of Beowulf and is ready to welcome the young prince and his men. So basically they show up on the shore, and somebody sort of says, wait here, we're going to go get Wulfgar. And Wulfgar comes down and says, all right, I've heard of you, come and talk to Hrothgar. First, Wulfgar is going to ask something of them. Before we go on there, if you look at line 120 and 121 and 122, you can find the answer to number 2. How many people does Beowulf bring with him to help the Danes? What sorts of people does he bring? So you can look at line 120 for just a minute. Now TJ, pick your head up. That's just a little joke. Line 120 says, chose the mightiest men he could find, the bravest and best of the Geats, 14 in all, and led them down to their boat. So you can answer, how many people does Beowulf bring with him to the Danes? What sorts of people does he bring? The next question is coming right up. What does Wulfgar ask Beowulf and his men to do before approaching Hrothgar? And that's about to come. The first thing Wulfgar says is he tells him to do something before he comes to talk to the king. Then Wulfgar went to the door and addressed the waiting seafarers and soldiers with soldiers' words. My lord, the great king of the Danes commands me to tell you that he knows of your noble birth, and that having come to him from over the open sea, you have come bravely and are welcome. Now go to him as you are, in your armor and helmets, but leave your battle shields here, and your spears. Let them lie waiting for the promises your words may make. So that was the answer. What does Wulfgar ask Beowulf and his men to do before approaching Hrothgar? He says, you can leave your armor on, but leave your weapons at the door. It's not so infrequently that's what we do now, right? When you go into the police station, you leave your weapons at the door. It's a sort of show of respect, but also it's for Hrothgar's safety, just to make sure these guys aren't bad news. Beowulf arose, with his men around him, ordering a few to remain with their weapons, leading the others quickly along under Heorot's steep roof into Hrothgar's presence. Standing on that prince's own hearth, helmeted, the silvery metal of his mail shirt gleaming with a smith's high art, he greeted the Danes' great lord. If you look at the note for number 3, his mail shirt, you probably have seen these guys. It's like armor, but it's not like plate armor. It's like a shirt made of little tiny rings of metal. It comes into play later in the story, so just make sure you know he's wearing this sort of really nice mail shirt. And actually, chainmail, if you look up, free to Google search a picture of chainmail, but this stuff takes even the best blacksmiths now. It takes them years to make a suit of chainmail, so you know that he's sort of a high warrior if he's got a nice pair of chainmail. So here's Beowulf speaking to the king. Hail, Hrothgar! Hygelac is my cousin and my king. The days of my youth have been filled with glory. Now Grendel's name has echoed in our land. Sailors have brought us stories of Heorot, the best of all mead halls, deserted and useless when the moon hangs in skies the sun had lit, light and life fleeing together. My people have said, the wisest, most knowing and best of them, that my duty was to go to the Danes' great king. They have seen my strength for themselves, have watched me rise from the darkness of war, dripping with my enemy's blood. I drove 5 great giants into chains, chased all that race from the earth. I swam in the blackness of night, hunting monsters out of the ocean, and killing them one by one. Death was my errand. And the fate they had earned. Now Grendel and I are called together, and I've come. Pause to look at number 4. How does Beowulf feel about his own abilities? Look at the way he talks about himself. My people have said, the wisest, most knowing of them, that my duty was to go to the Danes. They have seen my strength for themselves, have watched me rise from the... So, how does he feel about himself? Take a shot at it. Yeah, I mean, he feels... he's kind of full of himself. He thinks he's a pretty tough guy. He thinks he's pretty awesome. And the next part of that asks for the 2 heroic feats. You heard him talk about driving 5 great giants into chains. You heard him talk about swimming in the blackness of night, hunting monsters from the sea. So swimming in the darkness of the ocean, killing sea monsters. A couple of things that are sort of larger than life. He's really sort of emphasizing, I'm a pretty awesome dude. I'm the toughest guy around, and I'm about to kill Grendel too. Good. Number 5 is coming right up. It asks, what single request does Beowulf make for Hrothgar? And then what weapons does he plan to use in his battle with Grendel? So people listen out for that. Death was my errand, and the fate they earned. Now Grendel and I are called together, and I have come. Grant me then, O Lord and protector of this noble place, a single request. I have come so far over... O shelterer of warriors, and your... Excuse me. I have come so far, O shelterer of warriors. Hey, wait a minute. Shelterer of warriors sounds a lot like a kenning, and that would be a kenning to refer to Hrothgar. So if you want to flip back over and fill in for Hrothgar, Shelterer of Warriors, the line number is 163. Shelterer of Warriors. And that would be a prepositional, right? Because it's got of in it, shelterer of warriors, which is a prepositional phrase. And what is that emphasizing? It's emphasizing what about Hrothgar, the king? That he's friendly to people who are heroic, that he's a protector, something like that. Any of those things would be fine. That's what they're emphasizing about Hrothgar there. Excuse me. I have come so we're looking for the single request still. I have come so far, O shelterer of warriors and your people's loved friend, that this one favor you should not refuse me, that I alone, and with the help of my men, may purge all evil from this hall. So what's the request? What's the request? That I alone, and with the help of my men, may purge all evil from this hall. He wants to fight Grendel alone. I don't want your help on this one. I want to be able to do it myself. I want to prove how bad I am. I have heard, too, that the monster's scorn of men is so great that he needs no weapons and fears none. Nor will I. My lord Hygelac might think less of me if I let my sword go where my feet were afraid to, if I hid behind some broad linden shield. My hands alone shall fight for me, struggle for life against the monster. God must decide who will be given to death's cold grip. So, what weapons? Nothing. His bare hands. He's going to fight with his bare hands. Grendel needs no weapons. I'm not going to use any weapons. Actually, that comes in to help him later on, as you'll see. But it's still pretty pompous to say, I'm going to fight this huge monster that's killed 30 of your men. I'm going to fight him with my bare hands. Grendel's plan, I think, will be what it has been before, to invade this hall and fill his belly with our bodies. If he can. And I think, if my time will have come, there'll be nothing to mourn over, no corpse to prepare for its grave. Grendel will carry our bloody flesh to the moors, crunch on our bones, and smear torn scraps of our skin on the walls of his den. No, I expect no Danes will fret about sewing our shrouds if he wins. And if death does take me, send the hammered mail of my armor to Hygelac. Return the inheritance I have from Hrethel, and he from Leyland. Fate will unwind as it must. So on the one hand, he's praying to God, and on the other hand, he's asking Fate, one of these pagan gods, to help him out. Hrothgar replied, protector of the Danes. Well, there's another kenning for Hrothgar, and it's sort of the same thing. Shelterer of warriors, protector of the Danes. There's Hrothgar on 190, if you still haven't written a kenning down for Hrothgar. We missed number 9. Make a list of words that carry the tone of Beowulf's description, and that's in 179 to 184. Listen to the tone when he talks about the possibility of him being killed by the monster. I'll read those parts again. And I think if my time will have come, that means if it's time for me to die. And I think if my time will have come, there will be nothing to mourn over, no corpse to prepare for its grave. Grendel will carry our bloody flesh to the moors, crunch on our bones, and smear torn scraps of our skin on the walls of his den. So any of those really sort of gruesome words there can sort of give the tone of that passage. He's painting a picture of his own death in really sort of gruesome terms. That was number 6, by the way. We'll finish out Hrothgar's speech here, and he sort of just says, I knew your dad, and he owed me a favor, so I'll let you repay his favor. And you can listen to that, and then we'll get to the battle, which is the last 3 questions on our sheet. Hrothgar replied, protector of the Danes, Beowulf, you've come to us in friendship, and because of the friendship your father found at our court. Ecgtheow, that's Beowulf's father, had begun a bitter feud, killing Hrethel, a wolfing warrior. So his dad, Beowulf's dad, started a fight with a wolfing, which is another Germanic tribe. He's killed one of them, and you know that the wolfings either want blood back, or they want to get paid for Hrethela's death. That's the way that Anglo-Saxons work, right? So listen to Listen to what Hrothgar does here. Your father's countrymen were afraid of war. If he returned to his home and they turned him away, then he traveled across the curving waves to the land of the Danes. I was new to the throne then, a young man ruling this wide kingdom, and in its golden city, Hrothgar, my oldest brother, you're going to love these names, a far better man than I, had died, and dying made me second among Healfdane's sons. First in this nation, I bought the end of Ecgtheow's quarrel, sent ancient treasures through the ocean's furrows to the Wolfings. Your father swore he'd keep that peace. So you see what Hrothgar just said. I bought the end of Ecgtheow's quarrel. So he paid off the Wolfings for Ecgtheow, so Ecgtheow could rest in peace, so he didn't have to worry about the fight anymore. My tongue grows heavy, and my heart, when I try to tell you what Grendel has brought us, the damage he's done here in this hall. You see for yourself how much smaller our ranks have become, and can guess what we've lost to this terror. Surely the Lord Almighty could stop his madness, smother his lust. How many times have my men, glowing with courage drawn from too many cups of ale, sworn to stay after dark and stem that horror with a sweep of their swords. And then, in the morning, this mead hall glittered with new light, would be drenched with blood, the benches stained red, the floors all wet from that fiend's savage assault, and my soldiers would be fewer still, death taking more and more. But to table, Beowulf, a banquet in your honor. Let us toast your victories and talk of the future. And so then they're going to have a party. He just got done talking about how too many of his warriors drink too much and get bold and say, I'm going to stick around and I'm going to kill that Grendel. And then what happens? Of course, they get slaughtered. But let us have a drink and a feast in your honor. Then Hrothgar's men gave places to the Geats, yielded benches to the brave visitors, and led them to the feast. The keeper of the mead came carrying out the carved flasks, and poured that bright sweetness, that's the mead, the sweet honey wine that everybody likes to drink. A poet sang, the shops, remember singing songs, from time to time, in a clear, pure voice. Danes and visiting Geats celebrated as one, drank and rejoiced. And that's the end of this. The next place we go is section 3. Now, BJ, don't start singing now. Save it for the project. See, it's a little joke. So, section 3, guys, we got 3 questions left here. I know it's not a lot of reading, but actually, this is some of the most exciting stuff. After the banquet, Hrothgar and his followers leave Heorot, and Beowulf and his warriors remain to spend the night. Beowulf reiterates his intent to fight Grendel without a sword, and, while his followers sleep, lies waiting, eager for Grendel to appear. Here we go. Here comes Grendel. Out of the marsh, from the foot of misty hills and bogs bearing God's hatred, Grendel came, hoping to kill anyone he could trap on this trip to High Heorot. He moved quickly through the cloudy night, up from his swampland, sliding silently toward that gold-shining hall. He has visited Hrothgar's home before, knew the way, but never, before nor after that night, found Heorot defended so firmly, his reception so harsh. He journeyed forever joyless, straight to the door, then snapped it open, tore its iron fasteners with a touch, and rushed angrily over the threshold. So, pause. Number 6 asks you to make a list of words that carry the tone. Oh, excuse me, we already did that. How does the author establish mood at the beginning of section 3? That's what we just read. So the mood of that should be kind of clear to you. It asks you to write 2 sentences. So write one that's a topic sentence, and then write one that uses some examples, right, using quotes. So the topic sentence should something like, the author establishes a blank mood using what? Using specific diction. That's another big word for using words carefully. A blank mood. Figure out what mood it is. So fill in the blank. And then say, for example, he describes the scene as X, Y, and Z. Fill in with some quotes. I'll read that part one more time. But your two sentences, the first one can read, the author creates a mood. What mood? By using specific diction. Period. For example, and then give us a couple examples of what kinds of diction that he uses. Here it is again. What's the mood of this area? What's the atmosphere? Think about a movie. A movie uses music a lot of times to set the mood. If it's a night scene, then there's, if there's scary music, then it can be a scary night scene. It's the same night scene. You use sort of romantic, orchestral music, and it's a beautiful romantic evening. It all depends on how you set the mood using music. Here the author does the same thing, only he uses words. So the author creates a blank mood using specific diction. For example, he describes, and then use some quotes, right? Here it is again, and listen closely. The next thing that it asks you to do is list 4 to 6 descriptive images, phrases, or actions that work to establish Grendel's characterization in the scene. So once you listen to that, again, you're listening for Grendel's characterization, and you can jot those down too. Here's the beginning. Listen for mood. Out from the marsh, from the foot of misty hills and bogs, bearing God's hatred, Grendel came, hoping to kill anyone he could trap on this trip to High Heorot. He moved quickly through the cloudy night, up from his swampland, sliding silently toward that gold-shining hall. He had visited Hrothgar's home before, knew the way, but never before nor after that night found Heorot defended so firmly, his reception so harsh. He journeyed, forever joyless, straight to the door, then snapped it open, tore its iron fasteners with a touch, and rushed angrily over the threshold. I hope you heard some words there that you could quote for number 7 about the mood at the beginning of this scene. I'll continue. Listen for characterizations of Grendel, and remember we're still looking for a kenning related to Grendel. He strode quickly across the inlaid floor, snarling and fierce. Oh, that's nice for characterization. Snarling and fierce. That's on line 248. His eyes gleamed in the darkness, burning with a gruesome light. That's a nice characterization, too, if you're looking for some more for number 8. Burning with a gruesome light. Then he stopped, seeing the hall crowded with sleeping warriors, stuffed with rows of young soldiers resting together, and his heart laughed. He relished the sight, intended to tear the life from those bodies by morning. The monster's mind was hot with the thought of food and the feasting his belly would soon know. But fate, that night, intended Grendel to gnaw the broken bones of his last human supper. Human eyes were watching his evil steps. Oh, that's some characterization. Waiting to see his swift, hard claws. Grendel snatched at the first geat he came to, ripped him apart, cut his body to bits with powerful jaws, drank the blood from his veins, and bolted him down. Hands and feet. Death and Grendel's great teeth came together, snapping life shut. Then he stepped to another still body, clutched at Beowulf with his claws, grasped at a strong-hearted, wakeful sleeper, and was instantly seized himself. Claws bent back as Beowulf leaned upon him one arm. Oh, Beowulf has got him in his grips. That shepherd of evil. Ooh, there's a kenning. Shepherd of evil for Grendel. If you want to write that down, that's 273. Shepherd of evil. That's a prepositional kenning. It's got the prepositional phrase, the of in there, right? There's a prepositional kenning, and I think you guys can probably say what's being emphasized there, right? But one thing you might not think about, which is pretty deep, is that shepherds, they talk about Jesus being the shepherd. The shepherds are usually thought of as being, gentle and caring, but he's a shepherd of evil, which is pretty A pretty kind of neat way of putting that. But it's emphasizing what? What? How evil he is, right? That he not only is evil, but he raises evil. He wants evil to grow just like a shepherd wants his sheep to grow. Guardian of crime. Ooh, there's another one. Guardian of crime. Same line. Guardian of crime. I'm going to write that one down instead. Knew at once that nowhere on earth had he met a man whose hands were harder. Remember, Beowulf is fighting him barehanded. His mind was flooded with fear, but nothing could take his talons and himself from that tight, hard grip. Grendel's one thought was to run from Beowulf, flee back to his marsh, and hide there. This was a different Herod than the hall he had emptied. But Higlac's follower remembered his final boast, and standing erect, stopped the monster's flight, fastened those claws in his fist. They cracked, clutched Grendel closer. The infamous killer fought for his freedom, wanting no flesh, but retreat, desiring nothing but escape. All Grendel wants to do is get away. He's scared now. He's feeling kind of weak. His claws had been caught. He was trapped. That trip to Heorot was a miserable journey for the writhing monster. The high hall rang. Its roof boards swayed and Danes shook with terror. Down the aisles the battle swept. Angry and wild, Heorot trembled, wonderfully built to withstand the blows, the struggling great bodies beating at its beautiful walls, shaped and fastened with iron, inside and out. Artfully worked, the building stood firm. Its benches rattled, fell deep. Oops, I'm always getting mixed up here. Oh, its benches rattled, fell to the floor, gold-covered boards grating as Grendel and Beowulf battled across them. Hrothgar's wise men had fashioned Heorot to stand forever. Only fire they had planned could shatter what such skill had put together. Swallow in hot flames such splendor of ivory and iron and wood. This is all talking about how beautiful the building was. You know, Heorot was one of the most beautiful mead halls. So you can imagine that the poet who's singing this out to Hrothgar in the original time period is really trying to blow smoke, up Hrothgar's rear end, for some, lack of a better word. He's trying to really talk about how great Hrothgar is. Suddenly, the sounds changed. The Danes startled in new terror, cowering in their beds as the terrible screams of the Almighty's enemy sang in the darkness. There's another kenning for Grendel, the Almighty's enemy. The Almighty being God, right? In the darkness, the horrible shrieks of pain and defeat, the tears torn out of Grendel's taut throat, Hell's captive caught in the arms of him who of all the men on earth was the strongest. That mighty protector of men, meant to hold the monster till its life leapt out, knowing the fiend was no use to anyone in Denmark. All of Beowulf's band had jumped from their beds, ancestral swords raised and ready, determined to protect their prince if they could. Their courage was great, but all wasted. They could hack at Grendel from every side, trying to open a path for his evil soul, but their points could not hurt him. The sharpest and hardest iron could not scratch at his skin, for that sin-stained demon had bewitched all men's weapons, laid spells that blunted every mortal man's blade. And yet his time had come. His days were over, his death near. Down to hell he would go, swept groaning and helpless to the waiting hands of still worse fiends. So you can see how it's a good thing Beowulf decided to fight him barehanded, right? Because Beowulf's warriors are trying to help out, and they're just swinging their blades at him, but it doesn't cut him because he's evil and magical, all right? Now he discovered, once the afflicter of men, tormentor of their days, what it meant to feud with Almighty God. Grendel saw that his strength was deserting him, his claws bound fast, Higlac's brave follower tearing at his hands. The monster's hatred rose higher, but his power had gone. He twisted in pain, and the bleeding sinews deep in his shoulders snapped. Muscle and bones split and broke. The battle was over. Beowulf had been granted new victory. Grendel escaped, but wounded as he was, he could flee to his den, his miserable hole at the bottom of the marsh, only to die, to wait for the end of all his days. And after that bloody combat the Danes laughed with delight. He who had come to them from across the sea, bold and strong-minded, had driven affliction off, purged Heorot clean. He was happy now with that night's fierce work. The Danes had been served as he boasted he'd served them. Beowulf, a prince of the Geats, had killed Grendel, ended the grief, the sorrow, the suffering, forced on Hrothgar's helpless people by a bloodthirsty fiend. No Dane doubted the victory, for the proof, hanging high from the rafters where Beowulf had hung it, was the monster's arm, claw, and shoulder, and all. And then in the morning, crowds surrounded Heorot, warriors coming to that hall from faraway lands, princes and leaders of men, hurrying to behold the monster's great staggering tracks. They gaped with no sense of sorrow, felt no regret for his suffering, went tracing his bloody footprints, his beaten and lonely flight, to the edge of the lake, where he dragged his corpse-like way, doomed and already weary of his vanishing life. The water was bloody, steaming and boiling in horrible pounding waves. Heat sucked from his magic veins, but the swirling surf had covered his death, hidden deep in murky darkness, his miserable end, as hell opened to receive him. So, if you didn't get that, how does Beowulf finally defeat Grendel? Take a look at the top of this last column here, where it says, "But his power had gone." Basically, Beowulf's got his arm in his grip, and he's just holding on, and he's holding on, and then he starts twisting and twisting and twisting, and basically he rips Grendel's arm off, and he hangs it from the rafters for everyone to see. Pretty sweet. Pretty gruesome, but pretty sweet. And Grendel kind of lopes back to his den, which is at the bottom of a lake, and we're going to go there in the next section here, but let's finish up this. Then old and young rejoiced, turned back from that happy pilgrimage, mounted their hard-hooved horses, high-spirited stallions, and rode them slowly toward Heorot again. So Heorot's finally safe. People can come back from where they've been hiding out, retelling Beowulf's bravery as they jogged along. And over, they swore that nowhere on earth, or under the spreading sky, or between the seas, neither south nor north, was there a warrior worthier to rule over men. But no one meant Beowulf's praise to belittle Hrothgar, their king and gracious king. And sometimes, when the path ran straight and clear, they would let their horses race, red and brown and pale yellow backs streaming down the road, and sometimes a proud old soldier, who had heard songs of ancient heroes, and who could sing them all through, story after story, would weave a net of Beowulf's victory. That's a cool way of talking about the shop. The poet would weave a net of his victory. The stories become a net that he's weaving, he's sort of creating a fabric of the tale, which we know is sort of true, right? That what starts out as a true story ends up being this story about a monster. Would weave a net of Beowulf's victory, tying the knot of his verses smoothly, swiftly into place with a poet's quick skill, singing his new song aloud while he shaped it, and the old songs as well. And that's the end of section 3, and you should have all of these done. So take a minute to check with your neighbors if you don't have all of these done before we move on to section 4 and 5, which is a little bit shorter and the question's a little bit easier. But if you'll just take a minute to talk that through, then we'll come back together and read the last sections.
We were sitting out on the step,
Ain't nothing to it. So what you gonna do, Ron?
Yo, man, I'm gonna go on the black man and see what they said is all about.
You can pass these into the center. Make sure you
I'ma say this one time, boy, and that's my word.
We rock the shot, the knock fly you through the Hindenburg.
The contribution is clear.
You add water to bone
And get the Jurassic vibe on the microphone. Now if you like the tone,
And how the harmony's done.
and the sucker MCs die before they begun.
well, I like to know if
All right. Section 5. This is pretty short. There's only 9 questions. Let's read them through and you can answer them while I read, and that way I won't stop reading and we can get done. You'll have plenty of time to start working on your project at the end of the period. The first, this is a section about Grendel's mother. Grendel's mother is about to attack Herod, or actually she has been attacking Herod ever since Grendel got killed. Question 1 you can probably already answer here, because it asks, why do you suppose Grendel's mother is attacking Herod? I mean, that's pretty clear. If your son got killed by somebody, you would be mad. So you can actually probably write that in there. Be careful here, because some of these ask you to write some little mini journal entries. So when it asks for a few sentences, give me a few sentences and explanation, please. Don't just write a few words. If it says this will require several sentences, write several sentences. I'm going to just give you a big X if I see one word. It's pretty easy to write a journal entry here when it asks for them. Number 1 you should already have. I'm going to start reading. Number 2 asks, of whom does Grendel's mother take to have for his dinner? For her dinner, so she comes to Herod to get some food too. And what else does she steal from the hall while she's there? So she takes one guy, and it doesn't have a name, but you'll see who he is. And then what else does she take while she's at the hall? The hall is Herod, right? The meat hall. So see what you can find there. And then soon after that, it asks you to describe her den in your own words. Where is she living, and what kind of place is it? Describe it in your own words. Use a couple sentences to do that. I'll start reading, and then you'll have time to finish this up, and then I'll describe to you what I want you to do about your projects. Although, this is section 4 and 5, guys. Although one monster has died, another still lives. From her lair in a cold and murky lake, where she has been brooding over her loss, Grendel's mother emerges, bent on revenge. So here she is. So she reached Herod, where the Danes slept as though already dead. Her visit ended their good fortune, reversed the bright vein of their luck. No female, no matter how fierce, could have come with a man's strength, fought with the power and courage men fight with, smashing their shining swords, their bloody hammer-forged blades, into boar-headed helmets. Slashing and stabbing with the sharpest of points, the soldiers raised their heads and drew those gleaming swords, swung them above the piled-up benches, leaving their mail shirts and their helmets where they'd lain when terror took hold of them. To save her life, she moved still faster, took a single victim, and fled from the hall. This is the answer to question 2. Running to the moors, discovered but her supper assured, sheltered in her dripping claws. Who'd she take? She'd taken Hrothgar's closest friend, the man he most loved of all men on earth. So there you go, Hrothgar's closest friend. She'd killed a glorious soldier, cut a noble life short. No Geat could have stopped her. Beowulf and his band had been given better beds. Sleep had come to them in a different hall. Then all Herod burst into shouts. She had carried off Grendel's claw. So if you remember, when Beowulf beat Grendel, he hung the claw, on the wall of Herod as a sort of trophy. The mother has stolen it, which is making the Danes mad, because that's a representation of their glory, but you can imagine that she might want that since it's her son's arm. He crawled back to the house without an arm. She came to get revenge. She got the arm while she was there. Sorrow had returned to Denmark. They'd traded deaths, Danes and monsters, and no one had won. Both had lost. So, devastated by the loss of his friend, Hrothgar sends for Beowulf again and recounts what Grendel's mother has done. Then Hrothgar describes the dark lake where Grendel's mother has dwelt with her son. So listen to number 3. This is from here to the bottom of the page, it talks to you about what her den is like. You can describe it in your own words. Don't copy what's here. Just describe it in your own words. They live in secret places, windy cliffs, wolf dens where water pours from the rocks then runs underground, where mist streams like black clouds and the groves of trees growing out over their lake are all covered with frozen spray and wind down snake-like roots that reach as far as the water and help keep it dark. At night, that lake burns like a torch. No one knows its bottom. No wisdom reaches such depths. A deer, hunted through the woods by packs of hounds, a stag with great horns, though driven through the forest from faraway places, prefers to die on those shores, refuses to save its life in that water. It isn't far, nor is it a pleasant spot. When the wind stirs and storms, waves splash toward the sky, as dark as the air, as black as the rain that heavens weep. Our only help, again, lies in you, Beowulf. Grendel's mother is hidden in her terrible home, in a place you've not seen. Seek it, if you dare. Of course he dares. He's the toughest guy around. Save us once more, and again twisted gold, heaped up ancient treasure will reward you for the battle you win. So, help us again. We'll make you even richer than you already are. Beowulf, hey, surprise, surprise, accepts Hrothgar's challenge, and the king and his men accompany the hero to the dreadful lair of Grendel's mother. Fearlessly, Beowulf prepares to battle the terrible creature. The next few questions come pretty fast once we start reading this. It asks how long does it take Beowulf to reach the bottom of the lake. This is one of those things where you can tell this is a story that's kind of made up. What protects Beowulf from Grendel's mother's claws? Hint, hint. Remember what he's wearing earlier? That really nice chainmail shirt. Number 6 asks, what's the name of Beowulf's sword? Why does a sword have a name in the first place? So think about, you're going to hear his sword. Why would somebody name their sword? And then the next one asks you about some lines, and it's kind of a little journal entry thing. I'll read down through there, and you try to fill out those questions as I read. This is on the next page, guys. The battle with Grendel's mother. He leapt into the lake, would not wait for anyone's answer. The heaving water covered him over. For hours he sank through the waves. At last he saw the mud of the bottom. For hours he sank through the waves. At last he saw the mud of the bottom, and all at once the greedy she-wolf, who'd ruled those waters for 100 years, discovered him, saw that a creature from above had come to explore the bottom of her wet world. Greedy she-wolves, they keep on talking about her as a wolf-like creature. She welcomed him in her claws, clutched at him savagely, but could not harm him, tried to work her fingers through the tight ring-woven mail on his breast, but tore and scratched in vain. Then she carried him, armor and sword and all to her home. He struggled to free his weapon, and failed. The fight brought other monsters swimming to see. So this is a lake full of monsters. That's pretty sweet. Swimming to see her catch, a host of sea beasts who beat at his mail shirt, stabbing with tusks and teeth as they followed along. Then he realized suddenly that she'd brought him into someone's battle hall, and there the water's heat could not hurt him, nor anything in the lake attack him through the building's high arching roof, a brilliant light burning all around him, the lake itself like a fiery flame. So, like, beneath the lake, I guess there's a cave of some sort, a giant battle hall with a high arching roof that she's got him in. Then he saw... I think we got that. Then he saw the mighty water witch, and swung his sword, his ring-marked blade, straight at her head. The iron sang, swing! Its fierce song sang Beowulf's strength, but her guest discovered that no sword could slice her evil skin. That runting, check the note for number 6, that runting could not hurt her, was useless now when he needed it. They wrestled. She ripped and tore and clawed him, bit holes in his helmet, and that too failed him. For the first time in years of being worn to war, it would earn no glory. So now he's got a tooth hole in his helmet. It was the last time anyone would wear it, but Beowulf longed only for fame, leaped back into battle. He tossed his sword aside, angry. The steel-edged blade lay where he dropped it. If weapons were useless, he'd use his hands, the strength of his fingers. So fame comes to the men who mean to win it and care about nothing else. This is the question that's asked here on number 7. It says, consider the following lines. So fame comes to the men who mean to win it and care about nothing else. It asks you to think about how these lines reflect or differ from your own ideas about fame and success. Think about what he's risking here, all for fame, for glory, right? All he cared about, right? His skull is about to be crushed by a monster's jaws. And it says, but Beowulf longed only for fame. He got right back in there. Some of you may think that's a really good thing, that like reaching for the goal is all that matters, right? Get rich or die trying, right? In the words of Fitty. And others of you may sort of differ from that. But when you have a minute here after I finish reading, and I am almost finished, take some time to think for number 7. How do these lines reflect or differ, right? Use 3 or 4 sentences to talk about those lines and what you think about fame. Hold on to that for a minute and come back to it. And we'll finish this battle scene. I think that's one of the coolest lines in this poem. This idea that, and it really sort of illustrates Beowulf's, his priorities. All he cares about is glory. He can die in battle, or he's going to come out victorious, and he's going to have all sorts of glory, and people are going to love him and give him a bunch of gifts. So fame comes to the men who mean to win it and care about nothing else. He raised his arms and seized her by the shoulder. Anger doubled his strength. He drew her to the floor. She fell, Grendel's fierce mother, and the Geat's proud prince was ready to leap on her. But she rose at once and repaid him with her clutching claws, wildly tearing at him. He was weary, that best and strongest of soldiers. His feet stumbled, and in an instant she had him down, held helpless. Squatting with her weight on his stomach, she drew a dagger, brown with dried blood, and prepared to avenge her only son. But he was stretched on his back, and her stabbing blade was blunted by the woven mail shirt he wore on his chest. The hammered links held. The point could not touch him. He'd have traveled to the bottom of the earth, edged those sun, and died there, if that shining woven metal had not helped. And holy God, who sent him victory, gave judgments for truth and right, ruler of heavens, once Beowulf was back on his feet and fighting. Then he saw, hanging on the wall, a heavy sword, hammered by giants, strong and blessed with their magic, the best of all weapons, but so massive that no ordinary man could lift its carved and decorated length. He drew it from its scabbard, broke the chain on its hilt, and then, savage now, angry and desperate, lifted it high over his head and struck with all the strength he had left, caught her on the neck and cut it through, broke bones and all. Her body fell to the floor, lifeless. The sword was wet with her blood, and Beowulf rejoiced at the sight. The brilliant light shone suddenly as though burning in that hall, and as bright as heaven's own candle, lit in the sky. He looked at her home, then following along the wall went walking, his hands tight on the sword, his heart still angry. He was hunting another dead monster, and took his weapon with him, for final revenge against Grendel's vicious attacks. And in the interest of time, I'm going to stop reading there. What's going to happen here at the end of this scene, and you can look at your questions and just fill these out. Of course, for number 8, the weapon he finds on the wall is a huge sword. It's too big for any man to lift, and of course Beowulf can lift it, right? It was made by who, Quintanar? It was made by, look back here, made by giants. Good job. and then what happens to it once he finishes the battle. This is jumping ahead, but I want you to have time to fill out your contract to get these questions finished, right? Basically, he walks over to the corner. He sees Grendel's body, right, armless, and he lops off Grendel's dead head. And actually, Grendel's body gives one last jolt. He takes the head, and immediately after he cuts Grendel's head off, that big, strong sword, maybe from the magic and the blood of these monsters, the whole sword melts away, and all he's left with is the hilt, right, the handle of the sword. He carries Grendel's head up, and the sword hilt up through the water to Hrothgar and the Danes and the Geats, and of course they're so happy he won. In fact, it says that it takes like 8 men to carry Grendel's skull, even though Beowulf can carry it by himself. So number 9, what 2 souvenirs, right? The hilt of the blade and Beowulf's head. He carries it by its hair up to the top of the lake. Cool? And then, of course, the poets sing. The part of this story that we won't read, which is what comes next, after he goes back to his home, to the land of the Geats in Sweden, Beowulf becomes king. Hygelac dies, eventually his uncle, and he's chosen as king, of course, because he's the mightiest. And he has a long reign as king, which just sort of flashes forward through his long reign. And then near the end of his life, his kingdom is being plagued by a dragon. And many of his warriors have gone out and lost their lives. And he decides he's going to do it. He's an old man. He knows it'll be his last battle. And he goes out and he battles the dragon. And he defeats the dragon, but he dies in the process. And the way that they celebrate him is they entomb him basically in sort of an early version of a lighthouse, because he was such a great sailor and a great leader. You talk about someone being the light of the world, or being a shining light on a hill, right? Being someone to follow. So they entomb him in a lighthouse. So he's for basically forever after, he's represented by something that keeps ships safe in the nighttime in the harbor. And that's how it ends. So he sort of lives a glorious life and dies a heroic death. And he's sort of the perfect hero, right? Good. You need to finish these questions up, especially pay attention to the ones that I'm asking you to write several sentences for. Make sure you're doing that. And then look at your contract. Look at that for just a minute. I don't have it in my hands, but if you look at it, the first thing that you're going to see is some instructions. And what it's going to tell you is that you need to decide what your project is going to be. Many of you already know. I've talked to BJ and Sean and DC about doing some music stuff. And I know I said something about Zell helping with that, doing the CD cover. And I was thinking it would be sweet to do, a really cool Beowulf track, a single. Make a CD with the CD cover, right? The lyrics come from the story, and you can prove what you know from the story by doing some original lyrics based on the story. The more specifics you can use, the better, right? Sean said he's interested in doing the music video, doing something cool for the music video. BJ doing the track, and I have iPads for you to use to make the tracks. But if you use something at your house to do it, that's fine with me. I mentioned something. Let's see. But Kane said something about drawing maybe a comic book based on one of the battles, either with Grendel or with Grendel's mother. A one-page comic will be really cool. Not treating all of this. This is way too much to treat in one project, but picking some part to illustrate would be really neat. I talked to Ebony about doing some costume design for a pretend play that would exist. I think it would be really cool if some of you who speak 2 languages chose a scene from this, a part of this, and of course not all of it, to translate into Spanish, to start with the English version and translate into Spanish, to make a sort of Spanish language version of part of this thing, so that someone who doesn't read English could also enjoy the battle scene or something like that. It's up to you, but you have to figure out what you're going to do, what the final product will be, right? For Sean and his group, it's going to be a music video and a CD, right? going to be the song, but the produced song, not just songs on paper or song as an idea. What's the final product going to look like? And then if you're working with other people, which you're welcome to do, and you can make your group however big you think it should be, as long as you think that you can get this done. I need a list of who's in your group, what each of their individual jobs will be. Now I know that if DC is writing lyrics, that he might get some help from the other people in the group. If BJ's working on the track, that he's working with DC on that because DC's got lyrics. However that works is fine. The same thing with, TJ and Will, if you really decide to do like some sort of a commercial thing, right? If you're doing that, that's all right. But you need to figure out what each of you is going to be sort of held responsible for. Because I don't want anything to happen where I'm trying to grade this and somebody's blaming the fact that it's not done on somebody else. Even though there's going to be a group grade, each of you will also have individual grades. So whoever you're working with needs to be in the list there on that chart, the name of the person, and what they're going to be doing toward what? Toward that final product that you put at the top. Below that is a little place where it's a place for you to fill in a rubric. There's a few different categories. One of them has to do with the content of Beowulf, which I do want you to prove that you understand Beowulf, right? If you're writing lyrics or if you're designing costumes, you need to be paying attention to what this says. Right? Don't just do whatever you want to do. Make it about this. But the other ones has to do with creativity and style, right? Which means that you've done a good product. This shouldn't be a problem. You get to choose what your product is going to be. If you get to choose, then you ought to choose something that you're willing to do a good job on, right? And I also want you to try to think of something, and this is not part of the grade necessarily, but something that's related to something you want to do with your life. This is all of this is about, yes, learning Beowulf, learning British literature, but it's also about getting you guys prepared for what's coming up, getting you started on doing things that you're interested in, getting better at your interests so that when you go on to college, career, or whatever it is that you do, you're more prepared to do that. Okay? I want the 2 sets of questions from you today finished. If you haven't done it yet, there's no reason why you can't. Check with the smarter people in the classroom if you're too lazy to have paid attention. This stuff needs to come back too, because I need it for 4th block. The packets. The contract, you can fill it out. Don't sign it yet. I need to look at it first. If you finish it today, turn it into a substitute. Okay? If you don't finish it today, then and you need to take it home, or you want to talk to your friends about it, or you need some more time to think about it, you need to bring it back on Tuesday. You need to be ready to turn it in on Tuesday. You cannot start the project until we have approved a contract for you. And that means that you're deciding, listen, you're deciding what you're going to do. So there's no reason why you can't do it. There's no reason why every person in here shouldn't get 100 on this project. A, because I'm giving you a full week to work on it, and B, because it's a project you're designing. If you're thinking of something that you feel like you have to do, and you're not thinking broadly enough, think of something that you want to do to prove that you understand Beowulf. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Now you have the rest of the period to finish up what you need to do. Brewer out.